Hello everybody, here's a great bit of automotive pub board trivia for you. What is the longest serving nameplate in the industry? It's not the Toyota Corolla, that is one of the world's most produced cars, but has only been around since the mid-1960s. It's not the Mini, that arrived in 1959 and is already beaten by Toyota's Crown, which turned up 4 years earlier. No, we didn't get it, but they have been building it since then. The answer is, of course, this. The Chevrolet Suburban, which has been in production in one form or another since 1935. And I am quite sure to my American audiences, this is a fairly common sight. But here in Britain, it's not. And that is why, until today, I never even sat in one. So now, behind the wheel and on roads it certainly wasn't designed for, what is this iconic American actually like? Seeing this big slice of high fructose corn syrup, freedom-powered magnificence go down the road has got you with a patriotic tear in your eye and desperate to buy yourself a slice of American muscle, then don't forget to use CarVertical, because if you're going to buy an import, you want a check that will make sure that a car is not just good here, but wherever else it's been. And a CarVertical search can do just that. In just 60 seconds, it will cross-reference a number of databases to give you all the information you want to know on any potential used car purchase. And if you use my discount code JAYEMM, you'll now get 20% off your CarVertical search. First things first, and I feel it's particularly important that we deal with this up front, especially for those that might not be familiar with myself or the channel. But I actually really like not just America, but also its cars. Both of them have their own imperfections, but don't we all? And I actually consider myself quite a fan of the Corvette, up until the point where they stuck the engine in the back and pretended it was some sort of American Ferrari. But the C5, 6 and 7 are all cars I really like. The C7 in particular, and C6 too, are cars that made me realise there's a lot more to American motoring than just big engines in otherwise unsophisticated cars. I also actually am a real fan of the Camaro, and potentially controversially, I think it's a better drive even than the Corvette. The Mustang I've never got on with quite so much, but it is certainly an automotive icon, and in recent years I'm even told Cadillac have done a few very exciting hot cars as well, and who can't fail to be entertained by the lunacy of, well, nearly everything that Dodge has been doing lately. Just about anything and everything that big supercharged engine went into is, well, a laugh. I even once did a very memorable 400-mile round trip in Floridian sunshine, monsoon and sunshine, to go and meet Tavares in a Polaris slingshot. That's a sort of plasticky three-wheeled affair with two at the front and one at the back. Their answer, I suppose, to a Morgan three-wheeler. I even have a weird thing for the Pontiac Solstice, with which that shares an engine, though I expect it's probably not a good car, but still, I like the idea. Americans also are proper car guys, very hands-on, and I just love the whole ethos out there. But when I do go and visit, it's the exotic, the exciting stuff that people think I'm always going to be fascinated by. The Mustangs, the Corvettes, the Hellcats, the Demons, that sort of stuff. But the fact is, I'm not. You see, here we get things like the Dodge Viper because they're interesting enough that somebody is going to put the effort in to bringing it over. But you see, the cars that I'm actually always excited to see are what I suppose many Americans would consider the ordinary ones, the boring ones, the Ford Cougars of the world, because, well, we don't get those. People aren't bothered about importing them. In the same way that I'm sure very few people in America know what a Morris Minor is. Though here in Britain, in the last decade or two, we have become ever more SUV obsessed, the fact is that compared to the Americans, we are rank amateurs. And what for most companies would be considered here the biggest car in their lineup, and a big car full stop, just about qualifies as a mid-size over there. And the car that many cite as being responsible for this full-size SUV craze is this, the Chevrolet Suburban. And what I am told is significant about the Suburban is it was one of the first vehicles to combine the usability, the durability, and the size of a pickup truck with the body style of a station wagon, an estate to you or I. You see, in the 1930s, 40s and 50s, SUV wasn't a phrase that existed. It wasn't something people really understood. But with this, it kind of happened, and then over time it evolved, turned into various different things, and this is actually the 10th iteration of the Suburban. It's currently, I believe, on its 12th. This one was introduced in 2007 and went on till about 2014. I think of all of them, the one I'm most weirdly fascinated with is the 7th. That was introduced in 1973 and went on till about 1990, 1991. And I love it simply because that, to me, is the archetypal murderer's car. That is the sort of thing that you expect to see in the rearview mirror of a horror movie. It's the sort of car that when that rocks up, you know things are about to get messy. I'm probably being really terribly awful and heavily biased. So at this point in time, I'd like to ask my American friends something really quite important. You'll have to hop into the comment section with your answer. If your neighbour rocked up and they just bought themselves a new car and it was a Suburban, what would you think? Would you think anything? Would you even batter an eyelid? Are there already 6 in the street? Or does buying a Suburban say something? It certainly says something if you buy one here, which is that you're not really worried about having a posh badge, because for this money you could go and get yourself a Range Rover, a Porsche Cayenne, or a whole bunch of other things. There is also more than a faint chance that the person buying this is going to be some sort of Americophile, which is absolutely fine. Anyway, let's talk a little bit more specifically about what exactly makes up this car. It is 5.65 meters times 2 of American steel, probably a tiny bit of aluminum, and well, plastic and vinyl and stuff. It's huge. I mean, really, really big. How big? Well, it is larger than just about any other car I've road tested, with the sole, I think, exception of the extended wheelbase Rolls-Royce Phantom 7. To give you some context, this is 2 feet longer, more or less, than a long wheelbase Range Rover, the biggest one that they sell. This is longer than a long wheelbase S-Class or 7 Series. The only stuff which has got even a hope of comparing in terms of scale that you can actually buy here would be an extended wheelbase Bentley Bentayga or the aforementioned Rolls-Royces. That's it. Now, on its own, in a car park, it doesn't actually look really all that out of place. That is until you try and put it in a car park with markings and regular UK-sized bays, and good luck fitting it in one of those. And this morning, we parked it next to my Ferrari 550, which looked like a toy car. In truth, when you're out driving, length of a car isn't actually too much of an issue. Width is, though. And on that front, I have to say I'm actually pleasantly surprised, because not only is this a girthy old thing, I'm also on the wrong side of it, and I would have just assumed that would have made it terrifying. It's actually not at all. This is a really, really easy car to drive. This generation of the Suburban was notable because it was one where they really tried to break the link between it and the Silverado pickup on which it is effectively based. Other cars that also shared more or less this platform include the GMC Yukon, the Chevy Tahoe, the Avalanche, which is a weird sort of pickup SUV kind of hybrid, and perhaps best known, the Cadillac Escalade, or the Rapper's Delight. Now, it's doing stuff like this where I have to be particularly careful, because I have to remind myself there is a lot more car behind me than I'm used to. In fairness, it's got a big old bonnet on this. Gear lever is over to the side and is just hilariously large. You can only tell which gear you're in by looking at the display down here, which I don't like all that much, but it does sort of work. there aren't actually all that many controls. So over here you've got a single stalk which does your wash, wipe, your fog lights and your indicators. Over here to the left you've got a pair of dials, one of which is for your headlights and the other for your drive mode selection. It's currently in 2 high, and you can also then have either auto or 4 high and 4 low. And I'm glad to see that this does have a proper 4-wheel drive system. You can get these in just rear-wheel drive, and that to me just, well, that just seems to defeat the whole point of the thing. Up front, naturally, you will find a nice, big, meaty V8 motor, which here displaces 5.3 litres. And it's the baby of the range. They go up to about 6.2, I think, for this, but previously they went up to 8.1. This one makes around 330 horsepower and about 330-ish pounds-feet of torque. And though the European in me wants to mock it for making such small numbers out of such a large engine, actually the idea of a nice understressed unit in something like this, it makes a lot of sense. And the engine is actually doing a perfectly decent job. What I'm less impressed by is the gearbox. Now, it's also behaving just fine. I've not really had too much to complain about with it, but the reason I'm not so fond of it is that what we have here is a JAYEMM 4-speed. Come 2007, and this was just ludicrously out of date. Later, they did do a 6-speed version, but not, I think, for all models. You could also get these in a number of different seating configurations. And the confused look I had on my face there is because I was trying to work out if it was the second or third row of seats that was the 3 across. I was in fact confused because both of them in fact have 3 seats. This one is an 8-seater. And I think, unless you are a family of NFL players, it is a proper 8-seater, which is very unusual to see in the European marketplace. Now, I agree with the gearbox because, yeah, it really should have been better. I mean, at 5-speed at least for this era, but actually, you know what, it's okay. And I suppose in some ways the Briton in me really wants to hate this car, and when you put your foot down and it makes a decent noise, doesn't really go anywhere, you'd be inclined to go, well, yes, it's silly and rubbish and nonsense and everything else, but actually Ben was terrified I was going to really, really hate this. He's currently got it up for sale, you see, at just over £18,000, and I would love to be able to tell you whether that is or isn't good value, but the fact is there are only 3 Suburbans for sale and the other 2 are much older, so I don't know. And this particular car has actually spent the majority of its life here in Britain. Its first service was done here at 7,000 miles, and it's now on 87,000 miles. Previous to Ben having it, it lived in South Essex, where I think it probably would have blended in quite well. And earlier Ben and I were talking about the car because it is something of a statement, and people here actually weirdly rather like it. One lovely passerby called Alistair, hello if you're watching, said that it looked like the FBI had turned up in town. In fact, I think if I did have one of these, I would be tempted to try and find everybody else in the country that had one, and let's face it, most of them are going to be black on black. It suits it weirdly. Though we both agreed if you had one in Texas, I think you'd have to go for white or silver with as much chrome as you could possibly get away with. But yeah, I would get all my friends with black Suburbans together and we would, well, pretend the president was in town. This is really bizarre. This is a narrow, tight little village, and there's loads of other stuff I've driven that's been really nerve-wracking to pilot, but not this. You've got a great view of the bonnet, it's all squared off and everything. It's not that bad. So let's try and make a passable go of being an automotive journalist, shall we? This is the LTZ trim, which I'm told is essentially the top one. Now, I can't really tell you what you get for that above and beyond others, but you do get multi-zone climate control, I think at least 2, possibly even 3. You did also get a nav screen and nice sound system, Bose I think in here and all that, but it's been replaced with a obviously European compatible Kenwood unit that now itself looks quite a few years old. There are screens in the back of these headrests. You've got a little sunroof up here. That's a disappointment. I think the car could do with a little bit more light in the back. There are some nice little nifty features though. You've got a power tailgate at the rear, which which is very odd because you've got your regular struts to support it and then a whole separate ram which evidently does the lifting and lowering. Looks a bit weird, that. My favourite bit though is there's a little sneaky button hidden over there so that if you open the rear door and you press it, it will electronically tilt the seat all the way forward so you can get access to the third row. There is plenty of space for a good full-size 6 adults in here, and there's just something about this car that makes me want to get a bunch of lads together and go to the game. And I know what you're thinking. You're going to be sat there going, yes, well, this is a great big dirty American bus with a huge V8 that somehow makes very little power. How bad is it on fuel? Well, surprisingly good. On the way down here, Ben achieved 18 to the gallon, but that's US economy figures. And there are a few people out there that aren't aware that US and UK MPG are different, because our gallons are different. And this is one of the few times I can say it, but the Americans are smaller than ours. So in British terms, this is probably doing low 20s, which I'm actually quite impressed by. Now, the one good thing about being on the left-hand side of the car is it means you've got great visibility for getting close to stuff over here, which you're probably going to have to do on a fairly frequent basis. Maintenance of these is actually not that bad either. Ben buys most of his stuff on the recommendation of the previous owner from Rock Auto. And not only are the parts from there cheap, I mean really cheap to the point that he sometimes gets suspicious, they're easy to get, they come over here nicely and quickly, and he even winds up buying stuff from there for his Jaguar XJ, which is his daily driver. He's not insane, he doesn't use this all the time. Instead, it's a high days, holidays and fun days thing. And he'll get stuff for the Jag, which has somehow been made in here, shipped to the USA, because it's cheaper to then buy it and bring it back here than getting it from a parts shop here. And I tell you what, us Europeans, we spend a lot of time and effort mocking the Americans for the way that they do stuff, but there is some stuff they do absolutely right. And they don't really like expensive European-style parts prices. And I love the idea that you can buy a car like this and even here run it on a relatively small budget. I mean, it's bizarre, and it's stupid, and it's daft, and it's huge, but you knew all of that already, didn't you? What I didn't expect, that I was actually going to quite like driving it. The steering's kind of light, but it's actually a little more direct than I thought it was going to. The brakes, actually, the servo action is just about right. Overall stopping power, well, there's a lot to stop, and the car goes okay enough, but you know what, it's just easy to drive. It's pleasant, it's nice. You get that little distant V8 rumble and yeah, you put your foot down, and honestly, we're making more noise now. We're not really going any quicker than we were at sort of 3,000 RPM, and I don't believe that speedo at all. That is not accurate. All right, yes, please stop, please stop. Okay, yeah, brakes, yeah, yeah. Oh, and yeah, that's the limit of the handling. So yeah, don't try anything tricksy with it. It's just not right and not natural. But you know what? When you're just pootling about, it's a really, really pleasant thing, and I quite like it. I do. And that, I think, is probably all I can say on the Chevrolet Suburban. This has been a surprisingly pleasant experience, and now I look forward to hopping into the comment section and seeing what sort of chaos and mayhem I have started when my British and American subscribers start sharing their opinions of this car. Because I have a sneaking suspicion on this one, you know, that actually the Brits are going to like this car a lot more than the Americans do. But only one way to find out. That's for you to hit that comment section, tell me what you think, and while you're there, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.